You are listening to the Wealth Without Bay Street podcast, a Canadian guide to building dependable wealth. Join your hosts, Richard Canfield and Jason Lowe, as they unlock the secrets to creating financial peace of mind in an uncertain world. Discover the strategies and mindsets to a financial future that you can bank on.
All right, coming at you again with another episode of the Wealth Without Bay Street podcast. Make sure to check us out on wealthwithoutbaystreet.com, as well as get interactive with our Facebook page. Head on over to facebook.com/Wealth Without Bay Street. Super excited about the guest that we have here today. Personal friend of both Jason and myself. The guy is one of the most neatest, interesting, wonderful people that we know. Huge amount of respect and just absolutely a joy to be around. You're going to be listening to our amazing guest, Jason Rink, today. Jason is the owner and creative director of Simplifilm. It's a video production agency that's based out of Austin, Texas. He has worked with tons of A-list talent and celebrities. He's worked with Academy Award-winning actor Richard Dreyfuss, as well as Senator Rand Paul and Congressman and former presidential candidate Ron Paul. He has also worked with global brands such as Aston Martin, Toyota, Mazda. He's an award-winning producer and director of documentary films, and he is the director and producer of the amazing, unbelievable, I'm a little bit biased, This Is Nelson Nash. That was a recent released documentary film of our mentor, our Nelson Nash, who, as you will come to learn and know, is one of the most incredible human beings that we ever had the opportunity to meet. So we're super pumped about having Jason on the podcast today. He's got a lot of wonderful insight he's going to share with us, and let's get right into it.
Welcome to another episode of Wealth Without Bay Street, and our special guest, Mr. Jason Rink, and he's joining us today from Austin, Texas. I think of Austin, Texas, I think of blues music. I think of the late Stevie Ray Vaughan. I think of an incredible art and music scene. Welcome, Jason, to Wealth Without Bay Street.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a pleasure to sit around and chat about all things with the both of you. We've spent some time on the road together and now on a podcast, so it's amazing.
Good. And one thing I think is super awesome. So for any of the listeners in here, what's beautiful as we were setting up for this is like one of the things I love about Jason Rink is that he is hardcore ready to go. Oh, yeah. And he's a creative guy, puts things together. And so we're trying to get our session set up here today, and we're trying to get the video working and everything. And it's like literally he's in the travel podcasting studio right now. He's got the Yeti mic and the computer in the passenger seat of the van, and he's like in between appointments. And the commitment level of Jason Rink to get things done is, I mean, it just kind of shows the quality and the caliber of the type of person you are, man. So I just appreciate it. And it gave me just not only just a huge laugh, it's just so cool to see that your commitment level to putting things like this together is awesome.
Who keeps a Yeti mic in their vehicle? Like that was,
well,
you got to be prepared for these things. You never know when you might have an impromptu podcast interview.
Well, it's funny you'd say that because I used to have Yeti has one called the Blue Snowball. I used to have it in the center console of my Jeep at all times. So I was like always ready to do a recording or a podcast. You just never know, right?
Anyway. That would be a lot of fun just to take a day and go through as many drive-thrus as you can with your
drive-through podcast.
Yeti mic drive-through podcast. Well, Jason, such a pleasure to have you. And I thought probably a good place for us to begin would be to have you maybe share a little bit with our listeners. What keeps you busy, and talk a little bit about, the great work that you're doing in your company and the people that you most love to work with.
Yeah. So, I've been in the video production world for about a decade. And I have a company. I actually have two companies right now. My main company is called Simplifilm, and we do video production for businesses of all kinds and entrepreneurs, help them launch video that generates results and sales online for them. And, I've worked with all sorts of different companies as well on the brand side of things, from Aston Martin and Toyota. And then on the online marketing side of things, work with some companies Agora Financial, Palm Beach Research Group, Casey Research, all of these companies here in the States that do financial publishing. So I've got kind of a broad number of clients that I serve. But one of the things I really love to do is work with small businesses and entrepreneurs to help them leverage and use video in a more powerful way to build their business, because I just feel like entrepreneurs are heroes. Entrepreneurs bring value and change lives with the products and services they have. And I think, that's really a passion of mine. So I like to find different clients who are up to things and help them out with that. So that's what I'm doing here in Austin, Texas, and it's great. I love being there. And then I've also done a handful of documentary films along the way, starting with a film in 2012 called Nullification, which is a political documentary down here about how the states have the right to push back against federal legislation in the United States. And then most recently, the project I worked on with you guys, This is Nelson Nash, the documentary on our hero and mentor, Nelson Nash.
Nullification, the rightful remedy, I believe, is the subtext of that film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I would add to what Jason said about the entrepreneur. And I'll tell you, having experience, both of us having experience in working with Jason, one of the things that I really admire about his approach is his ability to really draw, to really round out the vision that you've casted for a project, and his ability to really draw that out of you, and to help you think through bigger ideas and everything from camera angles to how it gets produced and the message that you're trying to convey in the project. And it was such an incredible experience to work with Jason. And I just have to share, can't really emphasize that enough. What a great organization. And so for our listeners, regardless of where you're located, geographically, that's a wonderful thing about planes, trains, and automobiles is that, Jason and his team are mobile. Yeah. And just amazing work. Can't speak highly enough. And people can check out, they can go to and have a look on YouTube. They can have a look at, the documentary work that Jason Rink has done in his company.
Well, and one of the things I love too, Jason, is you look at your personal website, your personal brand website, it's, you're a brand storyteller. And I think that's such a definitive, good description of who you are, because the ability to connect components together to draw a story in. And we live in a world today where as consumers, myself, yourself, we all want to be able to connect with people who bring their authenticity or their authentic self into their business, into their practice. And your ability to see that as things are developing. A lot of people, they think in terms of lists and what needs to be get done, but you're able to take all that work and then compile it into a way where it blends into a story that's actually meaningful and has an impact. And so I've seen a lot of the work that you've done. I've been able to experience it personally and be a part of it. And it's astronomical. It's just really something incredible. And I think I'm just so excited about the growth in your business right now and what's yet to come with it.
Well, I appreciate all the kind words. And one thing I'm just really excited about or committed to right now is we live at an amazing time, especially just to be an entrepreneur or a business, to be able to take your message and your solution directly to your perfect customer. Every one of us has got a video studio in our pocket and a television in our pocket. Literally, you can use your iPhone to get your message to the screens in people's pockets and do that through social media, online. The level of ability to target and retarget and follow people around the internet with a product or an offering, it's incredible. And so I just always like to find entrepreneurs that are are in businesses that are doing something significant, that are making a difference and an impact in people's lives. That's really who I like to work with. And it's one of the reasons why I like to work with and talk to people who are in the infinite banking and whole life insurance world. I think what you guys are doing and the people who are doing it in the States, who are doing it the right way, like Nelson Nash taught, is just one of the most unknown hidden secrets of financial freedom and power. And that's why I like working with agents, and why I wanted to work on the Nelson Nash project, is to just see how we can take that message more directly to more consumers, to get the word out on this thing that's made such a difference in my life and my business.
Well, Jason, what we're talking about when, hearing Nelson Nash and talking about this process that we educate the general public on, of becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept, our Nelson Nash, the pioneer, the founder, the developer of the process. Oh my goodness. We could spend episode upon episode just sharing with folks the incalculable impact that he still has, sadly having lost him in March of this year. And so, Jason, you've been a part of the community of authorized infinite banking practitioners through the Nelson Nash Institute. And Richard was sharing earlier about the annual think tank conference and having you there. And so, Richard, maybe share with our listeners where you were going with that.
Right before we kind of got started and went live here, I was just thinking back to how we kind of got connected. And the first time I met you, and I don't remember, it might have been 2011 or 2012, and you were there, and you're an interesting kind of guy. You've got this super cool vibe about you as a person that draws people in. You naturally want to go up and talk to Jason. He just seems like he's thinking about something. He's got something on his mind. Like, you kind of want to go up and talk to that guy. So I don't remember what the circumstance was. It might have been at one of the dinners or luncheons, and we kind of got connected. And then we got to talk, and you started talking about Ron Paul somehow. And I'm like, I'd been following some stuff of Ron Paul's, even from Canada. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, yeah, well, actually, I wrote the unofficial biography of him. I'm like, pardon me? And so, like, the next day you brought me this signed copy, which I still have, by the way, of that book. And it's phenomenal. Awesome book. I read it, like, the whole thing on the plane on the way home. And I just kind of, got an instant kind of connection with you on that. And then it was that same day that you were actually up on stage at our conference, which was interesting because this is a conference that's designed for the financial professional primarily. It's, it has been opened up on odd years to clients and the general public, but for the most part, it's designed for industry members. And, you're not a person in the industry. You're a filmmaker. You're an awesome, amazing brand storyteller, marketing guy. And yet you're at this event, and then subsequently you're always at the event. So, like, this think tank conference draws you back in all the time, but yet you're not a part of our industry. And there's something so unique and wonderful about that. And I've asked you about this a couple of times, and I love the way that you describe what it is about the group of people, the network of people, the process, the concept itself that keeps bringing you and drawing you back into that environment. So if you could speak to that, I just think it would be really valuable for our listeners.
Well, yeah. And, I am kind of a strange bird in that before I started my own video production company, I spent 10 years in commercial banking. So I was in equipment financing, and that really just didn't align for me. I always wanted to have a production company. I went to film school, and for whatever reason, it's another day, podcast for another day. I ended up in commercial banking and finance, and I found myself at Chase Bank in 2007 and 2008 when the financial crisis was beginning. And at that same time, I had connected with Ron Paul's message here when he was running for president in 2008. And it was just through a series of, videos and listening to him talk and about the Fed and about the monetary system. Here I was in commercial banking, and what he was talking about how the Federal Reserve worked and money and the history of money, I didn't know any of that. In fact, I didn't know any bankers who were working with high-level clients. I mean, we were working with, multi-million-dollar a year companies, And these commercial bankers didn't know this stuff, you know? And so I just had this realization that most bankers are just like salespeople, and there's this thing called the financial system that's like getting ready to collapse. And why is that? And so that whole journey just took me into wanting to learn about the Federal Reserve and then Austrian economics. And, oh, wow, there's this group of people that's been talking about the boom and bust cycle and all of this. And so I've got this financial background, and I sort of took the red pill of Ron Paul that opened me up to this Austrian economics thing. And through all of that, what's really interesting is it was during that season of time that I was first exposed to the message of Nelson Nash. And what I found was that over a series of years, it was my sort of traditional financial knowledge I had from 10 years in the banking industry that made it really difficult for me to grasp some of the very simple things that Nelson was trying to describe. And so it took me 3 years of looking into it, reading the book, talking to people before I really connected with what Nelson was trying to say. And so, you know, it's just like Nelson always said, it was sort of my traditional, you know, education that had created a blind spot for me. And so all of that to say is that, you know, I was on a journey for a number of years that eventually, once the lights came on for me, I couldn't sign up for a policy quick enough. And it was subsequently after that I found myself at that first think tank, Richard, where I was really there trying to explore, you know, if there was an opportunity for me to take my gifts of film and storytelling to get this message out there more, because I thought, man, there's just a lot of people who aren't going to read this book. We live in a culture where people don't read books. And is there a way for us to maybe create something that would be a short video that might get people interested and have more questions maybe? And so that's what led to the initial collaboration with the Nelson Nash Institute, a good friend of mine, James Nethery, with a product or a video called Banking with Life, which was the reason I was speaking at that event you mentioned, was because I was sort of presenting that film there. But yeah, which
is awesome, by the way. Great movie.
Oh, thank you. And you know, I think we made that in 2012 or 2013 or something. So, but yeah, so one thing that really I loved about the community too, of the life insurance agents. So number one, something's got to be wrong with me to like be a filmmaker, and yet here I find myself at this convention of life insurance agents every year. You know, what is up with that? And one thing that just stuck out to me is I kept hearing this story from these different agents in the Nelson Nash Institute, you know, the ones who are affiliated with the Nelson Nash Institute. They would always say, you know, I found out about the infinite banking concept, and I was in this particular career, you know, they had some corporate job or whatever. And well, yeah. And then I got my first policy, and well, then I just couldn't stop talking to people about it. And finally I just got licensed, and now I'm an insurance agent. And they changed careers to become a life insurance agent to tell people about this concept. And I thought to myself, that is the strangest thing I've ever heard. I've never run into an auto insurance agent who was like, yeah, I had this other career and now I'm selling auto insurance, or, you know, any other insurance. And so that was one of those things always sticks out to me about this crowd. It's like, man, there's something about this concept and this idea that, and the desire of the people that are within this community to serve other people and help other people financially. It's just tremendous.
Well, you know, we want to give a big shout out to our good friends, James Nethery, Ryan Griggs, Banking with Life. They have a wonderful podcast as well.
It's phenomenal.
And so we encourage, you know, listeners to tune into that and to consume that content, because it's really, really good. And, you know, Jason, thank you for sharing all of that part of your journey. And speaking of, you know, storytelling, like you're well-traveled, and you've done a lot of projects in a lot of different, areas. And so would you mind sharing with our listeners one of the most impactful moments for you on during your travels and all the projects that you've worked on? What is an impactful moment that stands out to you, and maybe just share that with folks who are listening?
Well, I'll go with what's fresh and what's obvious right now when speaking to the two of you is, first of all, when the three of us got together to create the documentary, This is Nelson Nash, a little over 2 years ago, or around 2 years ago, we had no idea when we sat down for those first sets of interviews at the end of 2017, early 2018, that when that film was released, that Nelson would have graduated, that he would have passed on.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, Nelson is somebody I consider a friend, a mentor not only financially, but in living a life of integrity, in my Christian faith, like so many ways. To have the honor to spend quality, intimate time with him in what would be the last, 18 months of his life, speaking to him, I feel like that was just a gift from God and from Nelson and from you guys. Like all of us coming together to be able to do that together was incredible.
That was, a pretty special moment.
Well, and it's a series of unbelievable moments, really, because we were down there filming for the better part of a week, and I think about those times fondly, and obviously I think I reflect regularly upon the time with Nelson specifically, but it's not just that. It was the whole aspect of the project, and times when we were in the van traveling to and from Nelson's house or David's house or wherever we were going, or some of the time, where we would go out to one of the restaurants and we would just have so many laughs that literally
Eugene's Fried Chicken in Birmingham. If anybody listening,
unbelievable.
Yeah, we're putting in a free plug for Eugene's Fried Chicken. What an incredible night.
And I'm pretty sure they think that we're the craziest lunatics when we go down there, because we were just literally almost on the floor, spitting our guts out loud the whole time. And so, but what it became, it was something bigger. It was like bigger than any one of us. It was bigger than us all together as a group. It was something that was, you just knew there was something, I've heard about this thing before in the past where people were a part of a project, like a film project or whatever, and they talk about the magic of it. And I never really understood that exactly. And I never thought about it much, but after being a part of that experience, I just completely get it now. I understand what that feeling is all about.
Yeah, it was. And it's funny. One thing that Nelson reminds me a lot of another person that I was able to spend some time with, is I was able to interview and spend time with Ron Paul on more than one occasion. And, Ron Paul really inspired me in many ways. And one thing that I noticed about Nelson and Ron Paul, they're both men of deep integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that those gentlemen both taught me is that when you live a life of integrity, it gives you a power. You're able to have a power and an impact in other people's lives and in the world in a way that's almost supernatural. I don't know what it is about living our lives in such a way where we embody the truth that we profess, but there's something that happens when we do that we're able to touch and impact people more powerfully than if we have sort of an incongruence in our lives around what we profess and how we live.
Yeah.
And Ron Paul definitely is somebody that I spent some time with, worked with on a couple of projects, and he, again, just a great guy, so full of wisdom, knowledge, grace. And so I've had the honor of working with him, and that's been really, really incredible as well for me in where my work's taken me.
And I think how we become receptive to and build strong relationships with people that have a mentoring impact on our lives is where Nelson shared the arrival syndrome, and sharing that, if you really feel as though you've arrived in knowledge, that you've learned everything there is to know, that you can't be taught anything new, he would always say it's all downhill from there. And I find some of the fondest memories that I have of Nelson is that every single time I knew I was going to be speaking with him, I was super excited to learn something new and completely receptive to that. And that is just one tiny, tiny element of how that man impacted people. And it was just an instant, if you're receptive to it, and he would teach and you would take some time to ruminate on it, as he would say. And then he knew you would come back to him and circle back with him and say, I get it. I get what you were sharing with me, a week ago when we were having a discussion. I've really been thinking about it. Here's where I'm at. And he would say, all right, you got it. And so thank you for bringing up some great memories of Nelson, Jason.
And on the topic of Nelson, I'm curious, so can you think back maybe, Jason, and just to share with our listeners, obviously you would have read Nelson's book before you met Nelson. Do you remember the first time that you maybe got a copy of the book and going through it? What were some of the things that stood out for you, if you reflect back upon that?
And what book?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, I got a copy of Becoming Your Own Banker. And I believe this is how it went down for me, is I did this film called Nullification, The Rightful Remedy. And at the time, I had a nonprofit, and we were sponsoring this tour around the country with an organization called the 10th Amendment Center. And it was called Nullify Now. And we were going to all different states in the U.S. On a speaking tour. And we would have a couple hundred people come out to each city. And eventually I had my film out. And so I had a table where my film was there, and I would talk to people afterwards. And we had some sort of miscount when it came to the tables at the event. And so there was a guy who had paid for a table, but we just sort of didn't have all the tables. So what ended up happening was I ended up giving up my table and saying, hey, here, you have this table. Can I just put my movies on the side of it? Can I just get a little corner for the movies? And that guy's name was James Nethery, and we were doing it in Fort Worth. And so that's how I met James.
What a small world.
And this is my recollection of how it went down. James might have a different recollection, but I believe this is how it went down. And so I started talking to him, and that's how I actually, that's not where I heard about the infinite banking concept, but it was sort of like, it was where I heard about it again to where I started to pay attention. And I walked away from that time with James with a copy of the book. And so, it's just like many times whenever you have your mind open to a new idea, it's not the first time you hear about it that it takes. It takes several times. James was somewhere in that journey for me, but he was the place where the idea started to stick. And so I picked up the book and I started to read it, and I can remember thinking, I don't totally understand everything here, but some of these ideas are interesting. And I read it again, and then I would call James up. We'd talk about it a little bit here and there. And so that journey went on for a while for me. James was very patient with me, but then I think it was about 2 years, a year or and a half probably after that time that I actually ended up getting my first policy, because I got to a place where I realized that in order for me to really understand it, I was going to need to start practicing it. I just learned enough from the book to know that there was something there, and you know what? I needed life insurance. So I'm going to exercise a little bit of faith here. I'm going to set this up the way that James instructs me to do it, and I'm just going to start practicing the concepts in the book. And I can absolutely say what's been true is that, as I've practiced the concept over the last 6 years, I've seen the power of it that I couldn't have seen just thinking about it, studying about it, talking to people about it.
Yeah, it certainly is transformational.
It's something else, man. And so thank you so much for sharing that. And you talked about now being practicing this yourself in your own life, and obviously you're a business owner. Your business requires a lot of travel or requires equipment, and you have assistants, staff members, that sort of thing, contractors you work with. What what kind of examples come up for you, I guess, thinking about just the nature of growing a business, which anyone who's listening to this that's ever grown a business before know that's complicated. Where have you seen that the policies that you have and integrating the concept in your life has become, a unique proposition that you've seen it's true value in incorporating it into your life and in your business?
Well, I didn't come from an entrepreneur family, didn't have any formal entrepreneur training. I've learned much about being in business from books and talking to other entrepreneurs, like many people have. And one thing I didn't know was how valuable access to capital would be at every stage of my business. And
that's such a key thing, Jason. What you just said.
Yes.
That is such a key thing. Could you expand on that?
Cash flow is the lifeblood of small business. And small businesses close many, many times because they just run out of access to capital. Like, there's small businesses that if they just had enough capital to get them through the next couple of months, things could turn around, change on the other side of that. Like, the ups and downs of cash flow can they can be difficult to navigate. And I didn't know that getting into business. And so I've experienced many, many times over the past several years where my whole life insurance policy has been there to, that access to capital at a moment's notice, to pay staff, to access equipment, to pay taxes, to access it for everything. Every business need I've had, I've been able to use my policy for and repay that over the course when the cash flow is high, and replenish that. And it's just been crucial. I wouldn't be in business today if it weren't for how I structured that policy and started to build that bank when I didn't need it. And the other thing I would say about that is, prior to me ever doing $500,000 in revenue in my business, when I was doing less than that, cash flow wasn't as big of a problem. But once I started to actually pay other people and expand, it was interesting to me that nobody ever told me that as I would make more money in my business, that I might actually take less home and that these expenses would grow, and things just got way more complicated once I started to become more successul. I didn't know that was going to happen.
We share with people all the time that it's tough enough running a business with money.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And that is just, what you just described there, Jason, it's something that's so important for our listeners who are in business. Maybe you're just, maybe you're just hitting your stride, or maybe you're just getting started and you're thinking about that big vision and recognizing that, your cash flow it's not something is automatically going to keep pace with you as you're growing and expanding the business. Having this wonderful process that we've been talking about here, becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept. Jason just talked all about ease of access to money, having capital when opportunity showed up, being able to take care of overhead, staff, etc., ready access to capital. No conversation about, whether or not the life insurance policy makes sense, or, all of the anatomy of the insurance contract. Nelson told us so often that this process has absolutely nothing to do with life insurance. Jason just shared with us
all the reasons.
Yeah. And so that was just a great overview.
I was thinking about, if you were to leave some of your newfound wisdom as a successful business owner to some of our listeners, And I kind of had this question I was thinking about. And if you were to go back, you had a time machine, you were going to go back in time and you were going to slap the ex-banker, Jason Rink, from 10 years ago in the face and wake him up and give him a clear, direct path, some kind of I want to short track, your next 10 years of your life. What kind of wisdom would you bestow upon him about thoughts around your business and that sort of thing to maybe help him get through all that stuff a little bit quicker?
Well, I'll tell you the first thing that I would do is I would go back to myself in 1998, I believe it was, when my grandfather died and left me about $40,000. Instead of paying off a bunch of bills, student loans, car debt, I would have started a properly structured whole life policy if I'd have known about it back then, back in 1996, with that money that I got from my grandfather. Be the first thing I would do different, because now I understand what a difference that would have made in my financial world versus anything else I could have done with it. I could have put it into a little piece of real estate or what. No, nothing compares to what I would do. I know exactly what I would do with that. It's the first thing I would do. Second thing that I would do is I would go back and I would structure my policy a little bit to accept a little bit larger amount of windfalls in it than I did. I've heard people say before that you always wish you'd make your policy a little bit bigger, and that definitely would be true. When you create that first policy, many times you're not quite sure what you're ready to commit to put in there, every year. And it's a new way of thinking about your money and about building capital. And so I would have probably made my policy a little bit bigger. So that's the second thing. And then I would say the other thing that I would say to myself as a business owner is to be very hesitant to take on more overhead, or to be cautious about taking on overhead, buildings, expenses, and questionable employees. That would probably be the other thing, because what I've seen as far as sapping cash and cash flow is it's those fixed expenses and personnel many times that can become that anchor if you haven't really created a business case for those expenses. That every expense you bring on should have some sort of an ROI to it that you can really measure. And again, that just goes back to the conversation of cash flow. Like, I just now see that cash flow is really so critical at every turn in your business. One thing I did learn when I was in equipment financing, I used to say this to businesses. This is before I understood the infinite banking concept, but when I was back at Chase Bank, I would say to business owners, they would talk about spending cash on equipment. And I would say, don't spend cash. You want to go ahead and finance this equipment, because every dollar of cash you reinvest into your equipment will generate, 13 to 18% return. I had some statistic I would tell them. And one thing now I really realize is, that was sort of a sales pitch back then. Okay. And so what I'm clear about though now is that my business and myself is the number one asset. It's the number one ROI generating asset in my life, and that I have control over. And so one thing I really realize is that the infinite banking policy paired with building a business, the power of those two things coming together, generating revenue and cash flow, and having a place to put that to grow and access it, it's the most powerful 1-2 punch to make sure you are leveraging the value of your most valuable asset, which is yourself and your business.
Wow.
The 1-2 punch.
The 1-2 punch. I love that. And on that note, so Jason, you mentioned the word hero earlier in the podcast. And, one of the things that we share on each one of our episodes is we talk about that, not all heroes wear capes. And you might not think of yourself as a hero necessarily, but every time that you create value for others, you're benefiting people and you're making life easier or better for them in some way. And you've really done a great job identifying the key audience that you love to create value for. And when you do that, you know, you really focus on the most crucial people in your life and really helping them grow their capabilities, and you're growing your own at the same time. And so my question to you, Jason, is who do you want to be a hero to?
Well, number one, I've got a 19-year-old son, and I'm working to be a hero to him every day. And I would encourage anybody with kids to recognize that even though your kids might not always say this or express this to you, but they often view you as a hero. And I'll speak specifically to dads because that's my context, but our kids often see us as heroes and we don't even know it. And we can be very powerful in our kids' lives when we live a life of integrity with them, and we honor our word, and they can count on us. Then that turns us into a really incredible hero for our kids. So that'd be true for my son, for my wife as well, of almost 21 years. And I would say that the other people that I would want to be a hero for really is, and why I love working with small business owners, is I would like to be able to help small business owners and entrepreneurs. See, when I left commercial banking 10 years ago, it's because I had an entrepreneur's dream. I was in work that didn't align for me, and I had the spirit of entrepreneurship in me, and I needed to express it. And I love talking to other people and people who've got an entrepreneurial dream to help them achieve it. And as entrepreneurs, we never have that dream to become a slave to our own business. We have that dream because we want to have autonomy and freedom and, you know, have wealth and all of those things. And what I found is that many entrepreneurs end up becoming slaves to their business. It doesn't change a whole lot. They're just slaves with their clients. And so I want to be a hero to other entrepreneurs. The way that I do that or want to do that is to help them scale and build their business, either through what I can help them understand and how to run their business more efficiently, or how to replicate and clone themselves through video content that can get them to their marketplace more effectively. So that's all. Only those people I want to be a hero to, right?
Well, you know, if we can pin down permission from the Foo Fighters to have the hero song playing at the end of each one of our podcasts, that would have been a perfectly fitting time. Jason, we appreciate you, and we're so grateful that you joined us here today. Thank you for being with us and our listeners.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Anytime. And I appreciate you inviting me on, guys.
And Jason, we'll probably put a couple things in the show notes here. We'd love to, for you to just share again where, someone wants to connect. They want to learn more about Simplifilm. They want to learn more about the amazing Jason Rink. Other than, of course, checking out the unbelievable documentary film, This is Nelson Nash, which is phenomenal. Where would you want people to go to try and do that with you?
Yeah, people can find me at jasonrink.com. And they can get to my various websites from there, or you can find me on social media as well. If you are friends with these two characters I'm talking to right now, we're friends on Facebook, and I love chatting with people on Facebook. And I always keep my feed very entertaining.
And the Yeti mic in your vehicle.
Yeti mic in your vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, people can find me on social and find me at my website, jasonrink.com.
All right.
I appreciate the epic, Austrian economics rap battles and things that you post from now and again on your feed. That's quite entertaining.
Have a great time in Austin.
Yes. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Without Bay Street podcast, where your wealth matters. Be sure to check out our social media channels for more great content. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcast player and be sure to rate the show. We definitely appreciate it. And don't forget to share this episode with someone you care about. Join us on the next episode where we continue to uncover the financial tools, strategies, and the mindsets that maximize your wealth.